So we're on chapter 10 of your biology book, and we're going to be talking about circulation and respiration. So the first thing is the importance of blood and the composition of blood and blood types, and then the design of the heart and the circulation of blood, the cardiovascular health, and then onto functions of respiration and respiratory health. So those are our key concepts, but today we're going to focus on the importance of blood in section 1. The blood, the life of the flesh. Don't you love this picture of these red blood cells and how they look in your body? Of course, for many years, I was a nurse with the Red Cross, and I was a blood nurse actually, and did plasmapheresis and taking care of blood and taking people's blood and giving blood, such like that. So blood has been always really fascinating to me. So I love studying about it. And so many times we think, oh, this is yucky. But the importance is that the blood, the life of the flesh, it says in Leviticus 17:11, says the life of the flesh is the blood. So blood is absolutely vital to our life. And a loss of blood flow for just 5 to 10 seconds can cause us to be unconscious and die within minutes if our blood isn't flowing. How important our blood is. So let's look down here. I want to look down here at this picture here, the importance of blood, and we'll go let's go from this cardiovascular system. So the cardiovascular system is also called the circulatory system here. This is what we're going to be talking about, the circulatory system. It consists of the heart, blood vessels, and blood, and it's definitely called a circulatory system because your blood circulates throughout your body. And it reaches down to the very microscopic channels of the capillaries, down to complete small cells. The blood cells. And so here we have the importance of these cells reaching microscopic so we can have an exchange of oxygen and waste products, carbon dioxide and such. We'll get into that in a little bit. But different parts of the circulatory system. We're going to start by talking about arteries. What are arteries? Well, arteries in this are the red ones here, and the arteries go away from the heart, where the heart pumps out the blood, and the red ones are the arteries. And then the veins are the blood from the extremities, from the small cells, going back to the heart so they can be repumped back. And then in between are capillaries. And these tiny capillaries they're the nourishment of the cell, of getting the oxygen and obtaining the oxygen, and then going back and getting rid of the carbon dioxide and other waste products. The capillaries are where the exchange happens. So we have that. Let's go down here. See, the arteries are red, the veins are carrying away, the blood vessels, you can see the blood vessels of the liver, the blood vessels of going into the pulmonary of the lungs, blood vessels of the kidneys coming out here, the vena cava, they're veins. The vein, anytime you have vena means vein, going back to the heart. And you have the heart here, the aorta, the main functioning artery, the big artery comes out of the heart. And let's go up here, the blood vessels even of the brain. So blood in scripture. Let's talk a little bit about blood in scripture. More than any other substance in the body, God talks about blood. And so how important is we know about blood, right? Because in the blood, you'll find the amazing creativity of God and how God has protected us in every way by our blood, protected our bodies. It's so amazing that we could not just happen with evolution, that's for sure. So once it was thought that blood was very simple, just a simple liquid. But now we know in the blood are thousands of different little molecules that are very complicated, and each with a specific job, a specific thing to do. And guess what? Every single person's blood is different, and the life of the flesh is in the blood. So it's biblical to study about blood. So let's talk about the components of blood. I'm going to go on to the next, hopefully these, goes on to the next one here. Let's see, okay. Here we go, the components of blood here. So I used to do this with a blood plasma machine, and we used to always spin out. I was one of the first, way back in the 80s, you know, when we first started, 1980 to 85 or whatever, we started, and we would spin the blood out in a centrifuge, and so the blood would be like, you know, a churn. It would churn it out, just kind of like, and take the lighter portions of the blood would come to the top, and then the heavier red blood cells would be on the bottom, because we wanted to a lot of times get rid of the plasma, because maybe the plasma was diseased, or maybe we wanted to take somebody's plasma, or maybe we needed a blood component. Sometimes we need platelets, and we'd take the platelets out. And sometimes the red blood cells would have to be taken out, but it depended on which part was diseased, or it depended on people giving their blood, if they were giving their plasma, or if they were giving their whole blood. But anyway, we won't get into all of that. It's a little complicated. But the components of blood is a thick fluid, and it's always known that it had many solid particles in the blood. But as we see here, the components, there are some definite parts of the blood, and we have the plasma. 55% of the blood is plasma, of your blood is plasma. And 45% of the blood is your red blood cells. And in between you have a small layer of platelets in between those two layers. But those are basic. There's 5 to 6 liters of blood in your body. So that'd be 1.5 gallons of blood, you know, so. And the blood is red in color, of course, because of the hemoglobin in your blood that takes the oxygen. And the arteries, like we said in that picture, you showed in that picture, are bright red because they carry more oxygen. So if you looked at blood from your arteries, they would look brighter red. And then your veins are dull red, almost a blue appearance, as the picture shows, with the blue, kind of the dull red appearance in the blood from the veins, because it's low in oxygen. So let's go back to the components here. The plasma. Plasma is a straw color, and it's called the matrix in your body, the liquid part. And of course your body is 90% water, if you didn't know that. So, or the plasma is 90%, I'm not saying your body, your plasma is 90% water. And the plasma is full of the digested food, such as glucose. Plasma holds the glucose and the fats and the protein and the amino acids. They're all in that plasma as the plasma goes through, holding that. Also waste molecules and hormones and proteins. So all these things are in there. So like if you have a disease and it's in your plasma, it's probably something wrong with something that's holding in the plasma, right? So the plasma. And the blood proteins are in the plasma. What are blood proteins? Well, blood proteins are different things that have different jobs in your blood. There's 3 different ones listed. Let's see if I have it listed here. Let's go up here. Okay, here we are. 3 basic types, and you can kind of read that. But the 3 different types of blood proteins in your plasma are albumin, and albumin is manufactured in the liver, and it's really most plentiful in your blood because it helps regulate the water, how much water you have in your plasma. And the other is the globulins. We have globulins written right here, and the globulins help transport fats and fight infection too. You know, in your white blood cells produce what's called gamma globulins, and these are antibodies that are in your plasma. So you have antibodies in your plasma too. You also have what's called fibrinogen. Let's go up here, maybe it's at the top. Fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is another blood protein that's in the plasma, and fibrinogen helps in clotting and having your blood being able to clot. So remember, blood proteins, 3 of them, albumin, regulates your water inside of your plasma. Globulins help transport fats and fight infection, and they produce gamma globulins, you know, and antibodies. And then fibrinogen has to do with clotting. And fibrinogen is manufactured in the liver, it says. So plasma is so important. This plasma is so important in blood pressure, because if you lose a lot of your plasma, you tend to go into circulatory shock. Because as you lose this plasma, your temperature in your body falls, your skin will get clammy, you'll have extreme weakness, mental confusion, and can gradually cause you to die if you don't get a blood transfusion, right? And most of the time when people lose a lot of plasma, they're losing their red blood cells too. But blood plasma, they used to take blood plasma, to give a transfusion of somebody else's blood plasma, and give blood plasma to people that were in war there, and they got shot, and they were first thing they do is they take these young men or women that were bleeding or whatever, and they needed to have a transfusion. They would give them plasma. They would give them plasma to keep them from going into shock. So, how important is our plasma? Here's a picture too of the red blood cell. Now we're going to talk about the white blood cell, and we're talking about the platelets. These are the type of blood cells. We have white blood cells, right? White blood cells looking bigger, and these come in all different shapes. And then we have red blood cells, the way they look there, kind of indented there, and they hold the hemoglobin, and we have platelets. Platelets. So let's go on to the red blood cells. What do the red blood cells do? We have, see a red blood cell there? We know that the red blood cells carry oxygen. That's an important thing. As you go through here, now look, the red blood cells carry oxygen. I'm going to go on and see the picture for the next one. Okay. Okay. So the red blood cells, okay, you have in one drop of blood, you have 5 million red blood cells, 5 million of them. And they're called, another name for red blood cells, they're called erythrocytes. Erythrocyte, E-R-Y, erythrocytes. And these erythrocytes, I say red blood cell, RBC, red blood cells, a little easier than erythrocytes, but that's what they're called. Erythro means red. And 25 trillion of them are in your body. In fact, if you took all of your red blood cells and you lined them up end to end, if you lined up your red blood cells end to end, let's look at that one red blood cell here. Well, sorry, let's go back. Okay. If you took these little red blood cells and you lined them up end to end, what would you get? You would be able to go around the earth 5 times. That's how long those red blood cells, how many red blood cells you have in your body. Isn't that amazing? Well, red blood cells lack a nucleus. So here we go. They're just they're round shaped and indented, but they don't have a nucleus like a lot of other cells have. This makes it more efficient so they can hold more oxygen, or hold more hemoglobin that holds the oxygen. So let's talk about the hemoglobin. The last picture was hemoglobin. So here we go with the hemoglobin. Let's maybe zoom in on this, huh? There we go. The hemoglobin here, okay? So hemoglobin are in red blood cells, and the hemoglobin contain iron. So if you don't have enough iron in your blood, your hemoglobin will probably be low. See, hemoglobin binds easily to oxygen. That's where the binding to oxygen happens, how the red blood cells transport oxygen. And hemoglobin is what gives the blood cells the red color. And it binds and gives up, they bind and give up oxygen quite easy. So they give up oxygen, and then when they give up oxygen, they take in carbon dioxide to get rid of wastes. It's such an amazing process. Can you believe that? So in a red blood cell, now we have these hemo. And these are this is the iron atom on here. This is the hemoglobin molecule. Can you believe that? That's what it looks like. This is your hemoglobin. It has 4 parts of hemoglobin. The hema groups. So it has 4 parts of the hema. In fact, as it's binding, each red blood cell has 25 million molecules of hemoglobin, which are 1/3 of the cell's volume take up. So the hemoglobin take up 1/3 of the red blood cell. So hemoglobin there's tons of these in one red blood cell. Each hemoglobin, these far hema groups, they have an atom of iron and they loosely bind with oxygen. And oxygen is high in the lungs. So it's so high in the lungs that it saturates the hemoglobin. It comes in and saturates the hemoglobin and takes it in, and then in the lungs, and then it passes, it's full, so it passes through. And then of course, when it passes through the tissues, they're low in oxygen, so the tissues take in the oxygen and give off the carbon dioxide. So it's such an amazing process with these molecules of hemoglobin. What is anemia? Let's talk. It talks about anemia down here. What is anemia? Let's talk about it right there. They're talking about anemia. Anemia is where you have too little oxygen. They're transported by your body cells, so you feel sick because your bodies are lacking oxygen, you're weak and tired, and you have a hard time breathing. It can be due to lack of iron deficiency anemia, or you're not getting enough iron in your body, or it can be the lack of hemoglobins. You don't have enough hemoglobins in your iron, or you have too few red blood cells. So there's different kinds, and also there's other kinds of anemia, one that are inherited. There's one that they talked about here. Let's see. Sickle cell anemia. Here we go. Sickle cell. So talking about sickle cell anemia right here. Sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is inherited. A lot of African Americans get sickle cell anemia, and it's very unique because it's a genetic defect. Only certain people get sickle cell because of the genes. But it makes your hemoglobin clump together in these long little crystals. And these little crystals are really brittle and they're sickle shaped. That's why they call them sickle shells. And they have very sharp points. And so they puncture the red blood cell membranes, and they can cause a lot of damage and kidney damage. And so a lot of times they have to have transfusions of red blood cells when they have these sickle cell attacks. It's really sad. It's really a harsh disease. Now, red blood cells are produced in the red marrow. In the red blood marrow, that's where they're produced, in your bones. Your marrow's in your bones, and especially in your long bones, like your femur and your humerus. Let's go, I'm kind of going here to life cell, which we're going to go next. But anyway, in the red blood cells, they're found in, they originate in these stem cells. Have you ever heard of stem cells? Where there's special cells there that produce the blood cells. And they produce the blood cells, make the blood cells, and the nuclei are just expelled because the blood cells don't have a nucleus. And they allow to carry more hemoglobin, more oxygen, because they don't have a nucleus. So, but they're originally, so your red bone marrow and your bones makes these blood cells. How amazing. The erythrocytes, or red blood cells, the same thing, they live for about 120 days. We're talking about the lifestyle now. They live about 120 days. And they're replaced, 2 million of them each second are replaced. Can you imagine your 2 million red blood cells are being replaced right now inside of you? Quite a deal. Well, the kidneys monitor the oxygen level, are monitored by the kidneys, your kidneys, and they produce erythropoietin. Erythropoietin, I call it potent, but it's poietin. Erythropoietin stimulates the red marrow to produce red blood cells. And when the oxygen's low, then basically the oxygen's low, it stimulates more erythropoietin to produce more, and vice versa. So here's the life cell of a red blood cell. Let's see, we start right down here. New blood cells are formed in the red bone marrow. Yep, there they are. And then the blood cells circulate through the veins and the arteries and the capillaries. So you see how it's going from here, how they circulate, going through here. They're going in. Worn out cells are dismantled by the spleen. The spleen takes out the old red blood cells, and the hemoglobin is broken down in the liver, and the iron is recycled. So and then it goes back to the bone marrow. What a great cycle. Amazing cycle. A lot of red blood cells are stored in an organ called the spleen. And in the spleen is actually located in your body, in their abdomen cavity behind the stomach. and it supplies the red blood cells supplies red blood cells when it needs oxygen, because the spleen is full of a lot of blood. So if somebody has a spleen injury, they can actually die because there's a lot of blood in their spleen. So, and the spleen and liver, they, of course, there we see how, are involved in destroying, getting rid of these old blood cells that are damaged. They can become very fragile, so we're constantly having to produce new red blood cells. The spleen and the liver, they call them dismantle it, and then the liver, of course, dismantles the hemoglobin and recycles the hemoglobin to be used again. So let's go on here. So that's the cycle there. We're going to talk about white blood cells here. You don't have a picture of a white blood cell. Well, anyway, let's talk about the white blood cells. The white blood cells are so amazing. I wish I had a whole bunch of pictures of white blood cells. Let's go on to next. Maybe there's some pictures here. I don't think so, but no pictures here. I just see the picture of that's platelets. Let's go back. Okay, we're talking about the white blood cells. I wish I had some pictures because there's so many different kinds. They're so cool. White blood cells are called leukocytes, and they're produced also in the red marrow and also in the lymph nodes. The white blood cells, you can have one white blood cell and for each 6 red blood cells. So 6 little red blood cells are the size of one white blood cell. They have a nucleus, they have a mitochondria, they have organelles. They are colorless because they have no hemoglobin. So they're different. They're white colored or yellowish color, have no hemoglobin, but they have all these different parts, and they are designed for attack. They're designed for attack in your immune system. They help fight disease and basically killing, killing little bacteria and all kinds of little viruses or anything. They're designed to attack. They're the immune system. There's different kinds of white blood cells. And what kinds of white blood cells are there? Let's see. This one talks about soldier cells, which is pretty important. But let's say, okay, here's the types of white blood cells. Some white blood cells serve as mobile mutation factories. So they give out, they're constantly like these little factories that are giving out and giving out antibodies, billions of antibodies, like antibodies being these little guns or whatever, giving these little antibodies out to all the other ones and recognizing bacteria or foreign cells. So they're like these little, they clump together in little factories. And there's some that are individual killer systems, soldier cells that go through. These soldier cells that go around and are killing those bacteria and those viruses or any invaders coming in. They're called the hunter, and they're hunting them down. And then you have the kind that can move out of the blood cells and into the interstitial fluid to look in the capillaries all around, not just outside of the blood even, looking for invaders. And then there's the white blood cells that cruise through the bloodstream, engulfing bacteria when they see them and tearing the bacteria apart. And then there's those blood cells that are designed to sift through the intracellular debris for traces of foreign invaders and they sound the alarms if they're detected. Can you imagine that? The sign of infection, we have amazing soldier cells. We have amazing cells that fight, that are constantly fighting any invaders that come into our body that to hurt us. At the sign of infection, the white count would come up, more white blood cells are produced, and that's how go to the doctor, and if they take your blood and they see that your white blood counts way up, they say it's probably infection, or it might be leukemia. Leukemia might be another cause. So that's the white blood cells. So I wish that they'd had a picture of them, but you can look up maybe another part of your body, and you'll see, or another part of your book here, and you might see some pictures that they have of these white blood cells. There's all different kinds of them. And these soldier cells too, this is a cool article about the soldier cells. So let's go on, and I only have a few minutes to talk about one other type. This is all about, you can read all this, how amazing about soldier. This is what I want to talk about is platelets and how platelets Platelets are the other type, the last type that I'm going to talk about before we go into blood typing. But platelets have the job of patrolling too. There's 6,000 platelets of blood vessels in your body. And what platelets are is basically, so if you start bleeding, to cause you to have a scab or to cause you to stop bleeding. Platelets are these tiny disc-shaped cell fragments, very tiny. They're produced by the bone marrow too. They're round disc sides. Let's see here if we can see a picture of them here too. Here's some right here. Let's look closely. That's what we're going to talk about here. There you go. Let's see if I can even get closer here. How much time? Okay, there we have it. So platelets are produced in the bone marrow, and they're round disc. They're half the size of a red blood cell. You have these platelets here, and they have a specific job to do. They lack a nucleus, just like the red blood cells, but they have a host of different cellular machinery that the red blood cells don't have. They are for blood vessel repair. They have power plants in them, mitochondria in them. These little power plants, they manufacture protein inside of them. They have these little ribosomes that make the protein, and they have a power-driven frame, cytoskeleton type platelet can change its size and shape because it has a cytoskeleton that can change. So they are amazing. Platelets are the first responders in blood clotting. And so the lifespan of a platelet is only 2 weeks, about 14 days, and they're dismantled in the spleen. But when your blood starts clotting, it's pretty amazing how they go to work. How blood vessels are healed is pretty amazing. So let me go through that really quick. This is kind of a longer video, but I think it's important. How blood vessels so first of all, you have a problem. Blood vessels are healed. You have a blood leak. That means you have a cut somewhere. You've been cut, and now you need you're bleeding. So you need this blood to stop bleeding. If you lose like 1 to 2 liters, you go into shock. So your cut, whatever happened, the cut or the injury must be repaired. And so they send out millions of platelets. Your body will send out millions of platelets just at the knowing that you've been cut, and you have oh no, we know we have a problem here. And so these platelets are millions of platelets, they're attached to the rough edges of the wound, and they form this platelet plug to plug up the wound and seal the break. It's pretty amazing. Well, they have all these steps here, so let's look up here real quick. First of all, the platelets are activated. Let's go. They said, we got to cut. Let's go. So here they come. The platelets are coming. And they produce prothrombin. And prothrombin is always in the blood. And so this prothrombin attaches to the platelets. So the prothrombin's attaching to the platelets, and it converts to this enzyme called thrombin. And this thrombin, prothrombin, it means prethrombin, and then thrombin was released, and it converts to fibrinogen. And fibrinogen converts to fibrin. And then fibrin begins right here and produces this web. And this fibrin web, so that it won't leak, to form this web, so that it can tight this web. This web traps the blood and seals the break. And this spider web of fibrin pulls in the fibers really tight. The motor proteins draw in this fibrin really tight and seals it, and then you'll get a scab. And then later on, the fibrin web is dissolved by enzymes in the blood when it heals. So you have red blood cells activating the prothrombin. Pretty amazing, pretty amazing. So let's stop right there.